There is a playground in Everman, Texas, built for children with severe disabilities. It opened in November 2023. They named it the Noel Angel Alvarez Playground. The city council named it after a 6-year-old boy who lived in that town, who needed that kind of playground, and who deserved to run and fall and get back up and do it again. His name was Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez. And when that playground opened, his body still had not been found. A 6-year-old boy, a house full of people, and a system that had already been inside that home, family members calling anyone who would listen. And he was still gone for more than 3 years before anyone found him. That's what we're talking about today, and the woman who made sure of it. Welcome to GBR Life Transmissions. I'm your host, Caitlin, and you're listening to GBR Life of Crimes, where we explore not just what happened in crimes committed by women, but why they happened and the psychology behind them. Today, we're going to the suburb southeast of Fort Worth, Texas, to a rental house on a street called Wisteria Drive, where a family of 9 lived, and where one of those 9 was being treated like he was something to just get rid of. This is the story of Cindy Rodriguez-Singh and the son that she called possessed, Noel. Now let's go back to the beginning. Everman, Texas is the kind of place that simply doesn't ever really make it on the news. 12 miles southeast of Fort Worth. It's the working class. Pickup trucks and driveways, kids on bikes, the kind of neighborhood where you know your neighbor's car before you know their names. And on Wisteria Drive, there was a rental house. Nothing remarkable about it on the outside. A family lived there. Cindy Rodriguez-Singh. She was born on January 30th, 1985. By the time Noel disappeared, she was around 37 years old, living in a rental house in Everman with her husband and 7 children, as we've stated a few times now. And she had what police would later describe as an extensive criminal history. In 2020, she was convicted of driving while intoxicated, a repeated offense, after she crashed her car into a pool with 2 of her children inside. But she got 10 years probation. That same year, 3 of her kids, including Noel, were removed from her care, and they were placed with a foster family. They were returned in December of 2021. 3 other children had been living with their grandparents. CPS had been in and out of that family's life for years. And in between all of that, Cindy had married a man named Arshdeep Singh. They had children together, including twins that Noel never got to know. By fall of 2022, there were 7 kids living in that house on Wisteria Drive. One of them was Noel, but his father was a man who had been deported to Mexico before Noel was ever born, which means he never met his son. He didn't even know Noel existed until the day investigators called him looking for a 6-year-old boy, a boy they couldn't find. And everyone who knew this family knew that difference mattered to Cindy. Noel was born February 2nd, 2017, premature. From the beginning, his body was working against. He had chronic lung disease, a visual impairment, a limp, speech delay, a condition that affects eye alignment, and he needed regular medical treatment just to function day to day. He was not a low-maintenance child. He simply couldn't be, through no fault of his own. And Cindy's response was to withhold food and water from him because she didn't want to deal with dirty diapers. Witnesses said she beat him with a set of keys when she caught him drinking water. Yes, I know that face you're making. I'm making it too. For just water? But the thing here is that she called him evil because she believed that he was possessed by a demon. She told people that she did not want him near her other children. She was afraid. She said that he would hurt the twins when she was pregnant. That is a mother who had already decided that her child was a problem to eliminate rather than a person to raise. And then came the Santa Muerte element. And it does deserve more than just a headline. Because when investigators searched the home on Wisteria Drive, they found Santa Muerte imagery throughout the property, in the shed, on the walls, on Cindy's vehicle. Everman Police Chief Greg Spencer said it was everywhere. Santa Muerte is a folk saint venerated widely across Mexico and in Mexican-American communities. She is associated with death, but also with protection, with healing, with intercession for people that the mainstream church doesn't always reach. Millions of people pray to her. Most of them have nothing to do with violence. But investigators also noted that Santa Muerte appears in cartel-adjacent spaces, and they believe Cindy's veneration leaned in that direction. What matters most to the story is what the language of possession does to a child. When you decide your son is not sick, not struggling, and not in need, but actually just evil, something shifts in your mind. He stops being a child you're failing and becomes a threat you're managing. And that reframing is not accidental. It's the permission structure that makes the unthinkable feel justified. And once it takes root, it compounds. Every diaper, every meltdown, every moment that required patience, Cindy had already decided he didn't deserve. And that's how you get from a mother to what she became. The last time anyone confirmed seeing Noel was October of 2022. He was at the hospital for the birth of his twin sisters. Family members who had saw him that day said he looked malnourished, unhealthy, and that was the last confirmed sighting. The next month, Cindy applied for passports for her children, but that didn't include Noel. So she was already planning to leave, and she already knew he would not be going with her. That same November, she hired a contractor to pour a new concrete patio in the backyard. And around the same time, he threw away a carpet from the shed. That carpet was later recovered, and it contained traces of human remains. Between November of 2022 and March of 2023, Noel did not exist on paper, not in a school, not in a doctor's office, and his medical appointments had just stopped in July of 2022. Nobody enrolled him for the school year. And during that stretch, Cindy reportedly reached out to an acquaintance and asked if she could borrow their child for a medical visit. She needed it to look like she had a child that she was still caring for. And she was telling different stories to different people. She told her mother and her brother that she had sold Noel to a woman in the parking lot of a Fiesta Mart. She would later tell police that he was in Mexico with his biological father's family. And you can see where these stories don't match. But they weren't meant to. They were just meant to buy time. And they did. Texas Child Protective investigators reached out to Everman police. Family members had been calling CPI. Nobody had seen Noel since November. Officers went to the house on Wisteria Drive, and Cindy answered the door. She told police Noel was in Mexico with his father, and he'd been there since November. That was the story. Police related to CPI, and CPI tracked down his father. And he was indeed in Mexico. But the thing is, he had never met his son. He had been deported before Noel was even born. And then 2 days later, Arshdeep walked into his workplace and stole $10,000. He deposited $8,000 of it at a bank. And the next day, Cindy, Arshdeep, and 6 children drove to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. They boarded a flight to Istanbul. And from there, investigators believe they traveled to India. And we know Noel was not on that plane. On March 25th, 2023, an Amber Alert was issued for Noel, but he wasn't here anymore. And that's where the search started immediately. And it went on for years. Cadaver dogs, sonar on the new concrete patio. They partially dug it up, but there was nothing. They expanded to hundreds of acres of land north of Bluebell Drive and south of Shelby Road. Ground teams, drones. Every person Cindy and Arshdeep had been in contact with before they boarded that plane got a visit from investigators. Witnesses were coming forward, and people who had been inside that house started to talk about the way they had seen Cindy treat Noel, a little boy who she was calling possessed, who was kept from food and water, whose mother told anyone who would listen that she didn't want him near the rest of her kids. And in October of 2023, a Tarrant County grand jury indicted Cindy Rodriguez in absentia for capital murder, 2 counts of injury to a child, abandoning a child without intent to return. But she was in India, and Noel was still missing. 2 years passed, then 2.5. But investigators never gave up on this case. And on July 1st, 2025, Cindy became the 537th person added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, and only the 12th woman in the list's 75-year history, which is why the reward for information leading to her arrest was $250,000. Less than 2 months later, On August 21st, 2025, Indian authorities found her. She was arrested, extradited, and booked into Tarrant County Jail. Her 6 kids were flown back to Texas and placed with relatives. Rodriguez-Singh was not with her, and as of May 2026, he has not been found. Now, as all of this is taking place, we've now entered into 2026, but not just any time, now, because investigators had been back to Wisteria Drive before. The first search of that patio turned up nothing, but since this case was never closed, they decided to return this month. And on May 14th, just last week, a joint operation, Everman Police, the FBI, the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office, they set up canopies in the backyard. They brought back those cadaver dogs and excavators, and they walked that same ground that they had walked 3 years earlier. But this time, they found something. An FBI evidence response team loaded a large, heavy tarp into the back of a van and drove it to Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office. On May 16th, 2026, District Attorney Phil Sorrells made the announcement. The remains were indeed Noel, 6-year-old Noel. He was in the backyard the whole time. Now, the natural response to this information is immediately to hate Cindy, disgust, rage, and even a refusal to understand, because understanding can feel like excusing. But disgust doesn't protect the next child. Understanding does. So let's talk about Cindy. Cindy's life before Noel's disappearance shows a consistent pattern. Chaos that she clearly never resolved. Consequences she escaped or minimized. And a habit of making herself the center of every story. It was briefly mentioned that she had substance abuse issues, but she was absolutely a repeat drunk driver who crashed her car with her kids inside. And we know that she walked away with probation. And she had already lost custody of her children, and then had them returned, and was still on probation when Noel disappeared. None of that stopped her. None of it changed her. It just inconvenienced her. So when she married Arshdeep, she was building something new. A new family, a new identity, 6 children who were theirs together. And Noel, the one who didn't fit that picture, the one from a man who was gone, the one whose body didn't work the way she needed it to, that's who became the problem. And she couldn't solve this problem. So eventually, she decided she didn't want to. Psychologists who study family violence describe this as the scapegoat child, where one child in the household becomes the designated carrier of everything the parent finds intolerable about their own life. The frustration, the shame, the sense that things haven't gone as planned. Noel didn't cause any of that. He was just the easiest one to blame for it. And there's also something worth noting in the specific fear she expressed. Witnesses said Cindy told people that she was afraid of Noel and that he would hurt the twins. A 6-year-old with a limp, a speech delay, visual impairment, and chronic lung disease. She was afraid of him. Well, that's just not rational fear. Clearly, that's projection. She had constructed a version of Noel in her mind that had nothing to do with the actual child in front of her. And that invented version, evil, demonic, a threat to her real family, was the one she responded to. That kind of thinking escalates. It almost always does. What starts as resentment becomes neglect. What starts as neglect becomes active cruelty, withholding water, hitting him with keys, keeping him away from his siblings, not enrolling him in school, not taking him to the doctor. Each step made the next one easier because she had already decided that he didn't deserve better. By the time Noel disappeared, Cindy had spent years building a case in her own mind, a case to say that she was justified in all of this. And the word possessed here, it's doing a lot of work in this case, but not in the way that people usually talk about it. Everyone focuses on the Santa Muerte angle, the idea that Cindy had some religious belief that made her think her son was literally supernatural. But the more important thing about the word is what it did for her internally. If Noel is possessed, then Cindy's not abusing her son. She's fighting something that has taken over her son's body. No, she's protecting her family. She's the one being put upon, not him. It flips the whole dynamic. The child is the aggressor. The mother becomes the victim, as she wants to be every single time. And then in all of this, after getting rid of him, she tells her mother that she sold him at Fiesta Mart. She also told police that he was in Mexico. She applied for passports for 6 children and decided to leave one out. She poured a concrete patio. She fled to another country. These are not actions of someone in a dissociated state who doesn't know what they've done. These are actions of someone who knew exactly what she had done and immediately started managing how it would look. The cover-up tells you just as much about her psychology as the crime itself. She was not out of touch with reality. She was protecting herself from the consequences of it. Her jail letters are the final piece of this. From the state mental facility, she wrote to a judge, "I'm not a psycho person. God knows I'm not a bad person. They're treating me very, very bad." She wrote that it might be the last day of jail because God will be with her. She was not writing about Noel. She was writing about herself, her suffering, her mistreatment, even in custody, charged with her son's murder. And the story she was telling was about her. That's not incompetence. That is a woman who spent her entire life at the center of her own story, where she is the one being wronged. And nothing, not a dead child, not an FBI manhunt, not an extradition from India, has ever shifted that. Noel was not invisible. He had been removed from that home before, between 2020 and late 2021, and his 2 siblings, including himself, were placed in foster care because of Cindy's history with drugs and alcohol. The issue here is, how did they get returned and why? Because she was convicted of substance abuse in the car, and she had her children in there. But this is not an indictment of any one caseworker. The child welfare system in Texas, like in most states, is underfunded and overwhelmed, although some will say profited, and that's part of the problem. Underfunded, but also for profit. Either way, workers carry caseloads that make real follow-through cases almost impossible. And that's the why, because the system is not built for the volume it's asked to handle, but it is built for profit. And that's the main case. The caseworkers are working, they're trying, and yet the whole system, the whole point is not for the benefit of the child. And Noel's case is a documented record of how a system can have every piece of information it needs and not help the child standing right in front of them. His name should be in training materials at this point, and his case should be the reason someone changes how the whole system works. Last piece of information that has come through about the case with Cindy Rodriguez-Singh is that she was incompetent to stand trial. So what does that even mean? Because many look at it as a delay tactic, another way to avoid consequences. It makes the outrage make a whole lot of sense, especially towards Cindy, but it also looks like a planned cover-up. But one thing we can say is that it doesn't mean she didn't do it. It means that right now, at this moment, a court-appointed psychologist determined that she cannot adequately understand the charges against her or assist in her own defense. Those are 2 different things, and that evaluation currently is sealed. So we don't have a confirmed diagnosis of why. But what we do know is that the vast majority of defendants who are found incompetent are said to have a psychotic illness, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, severe bipolar disorder with psychotic features. These are conditions that most commonly impair a person's ability to track legal proceedings or rationally assist their attorney. And competency restoration in those cases is typically done through antipsychotic medication, which is exactly what the DA's office has said is happening here. So no, this time, they're not trying to let her off the hook. They're trying to get her competent. But as of today, with Noel being found, Cindy being ruled incompetent, and currently in a state mental health facility undergoing competency restoration, the DA's office has said clearly that the report itself notes that she's expected to regain that competency in the foreseeable future. So she will stand trial, and she faces capital murder charges. If convicted, she could face the death penalty. But Arshdeep, he's still out there. He has not been located. The 6 children who fled to India with Cindy are living with relatives in Texas. And in Clyde Pittman Park in Everman, a playground built for kids with severe disabilities carries Noel's name. It opened before they ever found him, but it's still going to be there after the trial. He deserved to play on it. He deserved a lot of things that he never got. And while we can't fix what happened to him while he was here on this earth, we can all make a quiet promise to never forget him or children like him, and to keep fighting for children who are treated so poorly and who clearly need help. If you know a child who seems to be disappearing in the world, quietly, gradually, in ways that are easy to explain away, don't look away. Trust that feeling. Someone should have trusted it sooner for Noel. Let's never let that happen again. This has been GBRLIFE of Crimes, part of GBRLIFE Transmissions. I'm your host, Caitlin, reminding you that understanding the darkness helps us appreciate the light. Join me next time as we uncover another case that challenges everything we thought we knew about the criminal mind. Hey, it's Caitlin. If you stayed this long, a big thank you. And if you could also do one more thing, to like and subscribe each time you listen to GBRLIFE Transmissions. That would mean the world, and it would really help GBRLIFE Transmissions grow. Also, don't forget to check out the reviews and blogs and so much more on GBRLIFE.com. Can't wait to see you there.
Clock in the corner, slow, breath between the words we choose. Stories in the spaces we don't fill. Soft edges, let it all unfold. Every small confession, softly told. Hands around a porcelain cup, name on your lips you never said out loud. Truth like a sunrise under your ribs, rising